Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the reunion of Final Fantasy VII Remake podcast. I am your host, Kai, and joining me once again today is my incredible co-host, Vyzz. How are you doing, Vyzz?
Hello, everyone. I'm pretty good. And those who have seen the announcement know why I'm excited for today's episode. And for those who won't, we'll see soon.
Absolutely, and exactly the same with me. I'm super excited for today's episode. So guys, the best way to support us here is to like, sub, and share the podcast. Hop on over to our YouTube channel if you haven't done so already and subscribe. And also you can subscribe to us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, wherever you listen to your podcasts because we are literally available on all of them. All right, guys, so today, like we said, we are so excited because we have three incredibly special guests here with us today for this episode. We have the voice actors from Final Fantasy VII Remake Intergrade's episode Intermission, Daniel Amerman, the voice of Polk, David Goldtein, the voice of Billy Bob, and also Griffin Puatu, the voice of Zhijie. So welcome. How are you guys?
Hey
guys.
What's up? Happy to be here.
Welcome.
No one's ever called me incredibly special before. I love it.
Yeah.
Of course. Nothing but.
He does this all the time.
So for today's episode, I thought what we would do is we might get to know each of you a little bit better by diving a little bit into each of your backgrounds and experience with voice acting. For example, like where you guys got your start. And then we might move into a little bit more specific discussion about Final Fantasy, your history with Final Fantasy, the franchise, and Final Fantasy VII. And after that, Vyzz and I have some particular questions for you regarding episode Intermission. And then also we had some listener questions as well that were submitted via Twitter and our Discord server. So we'll be talking to you about those as well.
Sweet.
Awesome.
Can't wait.
Nice.
So as I said, we're first going to start off by talking about each of your history and experience with voice acting. So let's go ahead and start with David. So maybe just give our listeners just a brief history about when you started with voice acting and just a little bit of detail. Was it something that you always wanted to do or kind of found your way into this career happenstance or what happened there?
Sure. I came to it late. It was 2014 when I first took a workshop where a voice acting coach was explaining his process, and I had never really been exposed to it before. And I'm 42 at that point. I've been mostly doing improv, trying to do on camera with very, very little success, and didn't know that voiceover was an option for me, really. I mean, I grew up loving Mel Blanc and those kind of, and all the voices of my childhood. And of course, The Simpsons and Hank Azaria, Dan Castellano, and all those people. I didn't know it was an option that I could even pursue. And then I did this workshop. I'm like, oh, wait a minute. This is a whole other side of the business that I haven't even explored yet. So as I do with most things in my life, I overly researched everything, all the different coaches out there, all the equipment and everything. And I just dove head first. Found a commercial coach, the great Nancy Wolfson, and about 6 months into her, I got my first national commercial campaign, which it's like the first time you go to Vegas and you gamble and you win, you think, oh, this is easy, I'll win every time. Right out of the gate, I get a national campaign, and I'm thinking, oh, well, I'm going to be booking left, right, and center, and it's obviously not that. So I've been working. I've been studying animation and game VO with Donna Grillo, who's a great director, and recently with Richard Horvitz, who's a really great coach and actor, and was able to get an agent again through a workshop like this, where the Vanessa Gilbert, who's a longtime agent in this business, saw me read and signed me up. And then after a few months, she sent me this audition for Final Fantasy, and we got it. And it's really only my third game credit. I've been doing this now for about 6-7 years, and unlike these other guys you have on your cast, I'm really kind of just at the beginning of the process. But
you got to start somewhere, right?
As far as you got to start somewhere, and you might as well start with Final Fantasy. I think.
Absolutely,
for sure,
right?
A great jumping off point, I must say.
Yeah, it's all. I think it's all
Absolutely.
downhill from here. But yeah,
Let's hope not.
that's there's hopefully short version of my story.
That's amazing. And also, I saw that I guess you had joined a Celtic punk band.
Yeah,
And you toured like before you started. And I looked that up and I was like, wow, that sounds
yeah.
amazing. And also, you play accordion.
Well, I'll try and keep this short as well. So I was with what was originally called Improv Olympic, which was now called IO West Improv Theater. I was with them for 10 years.
Mm-hmm.
And one of my friends out of there started a sketch show. And from that sketch show, one of his sketches was about an Irish band. And out of that sketch grew, he said, well, let's just make a real band. I didn't play an instrument, but I really wanted to be a part of this group. So the first thing I said is, well, what do you guys need that you don't have? And they said, well, we could use a fiddle player. So I bought a cheap fiddle. I found a fiddle instructor and realized right after that first lesson, this is going to take me 10 years. I can't do this. What else do you guys need? And they said, well, we could do accordion because the Pogues have James Fernley's accordion. Flog and Molly has Matt Hensley. So I found an accordion shop in Atwater Village, an area of LA, and told him, look, I want to be in this punk band. What do you think I should do? He said, well, let's forget about the button side. You don't need it. That's basses and chords. You won't hear it anyway. Let's just worry about the piano side, so I'm basically playing a one-handed piano. And I got to the point where just write out the music for me, tell me where my fingers need to go, and I'll be good. And that's basically what for 5 years, I just, without really learning how to read music or how to properly play, I just faked my way through it. And then I also quickly became the tour manager, the graphic designer, the merch. Like I basically did every job for this band. And we got to do Warped Tour in 2010. We did a couple of our DIY or across the country tours. We opened for Dropkick Murphys on St. Patrick's Day one year. It was great.
Wow.
I don't advise at 37. I was 37 when I did it. I had a staff job. I quit that staff job to join the band. And this was during the age of MySpace when literally no one bought records anymore.
Oh.
And so as a financial decision, it wasn't a great one. But I got to see the country. I got to play music for 5 years. Yeah, I don't advise it in your late 30s, early 40s to pick up as a musician. It's unless you love it. I'm not going to tell you not to do it.
Yeah,
if you love it, do it. But
sure.
Yeah, that was my detour for about 5 years.
That's incredible. And the fact that you got to play at Warped Tour is amazing. That's incredible because I think it's over now. They don't
do
Tour
it anymore. It was one of the best experiences of my life. Everyone who was ever involved with that thing deserves kudos. It was exceptionally well run, hot as heck. I wore a full suit, and we had to get up at super early, pace the place with our posters so people would come to our show. The hottest we did was in Arizona at 4:00. I think it was 114, and I'm playing accordion in a full suit directly in the sun.
My God.
But you know what? It was it's a story I can tell, and it was a lot of fun.
For sure it is, yeah.
That's an incredible experience. And I totally understand where you're coming from there as well, because I am a musician, actually. And outside of this, I do have a band, and it's a rock band, but I totally hear you. It's really hard. It's very, very
You need
hard.
to be able to drop everything, go wherever they want you, sleep on
Absolutely.
someone's floor. Like, you can't be precious about it early on. And we were older. We had, homes and families and things. So we weren't necessarily in that position to just hop in a van and go wherever.
Yep.
But if you can, do it. It's there. And the easiest part was the actual playing of the music itself. That's when everything else went away. We just played, had fun. And it was, for that alone, it was worth it.
Oh, for sure, yeah. I was also in a band at school, in high school, I think it was. And it was pretty fun in this half a year. Practicing all the time, and then at the end, at a big celebration of former students, we got to play in front of everyone. It was really great. I play the drums, by the way.
Nice. I started playing drums when I was a kid. I didn't stick with it. I wish I did. I'm now teaching my daughter how to play drums. She's 5.
Cool. That's really
wow.
And we're making her stay.
Nice.
That's awesome. All right, so let's go ahead. We'll move over to Daniel. So same question to you, Daniel. So how did you get your start with voice acting, and a little bit about your background there? Like, was it something you always wanted to do?
So my background is not that dissimilar from David's. I basically started doing stage performance. So I started doing plays in middle school and high school and college, and then I moved out to LA. And I was doing kind of like TV film focus and doing some plays and doing improv and all that kind of stuff. And then at a certain point, I realized that there was this whole other industry that used a lot of the same skills, but there was no like natural, no one was going to ask you to just like start doing voiceover. You kind of have to be a little bit more active in pursuing it. And so I just kind of started doing a ton of research and just it's like the type of thing where if you have the time to, I read there's this great voice actor named D. Bradley Baker who's in like American Dad, and he does like all these crazy creature noises, and he has a website where he kind of just gives advice to starting voice actors. And so I was pouring through his site, and one thing that he said on there that I always think about is like, if you're an actor and you're thinking of your whole acting career as like a war effort, like you're a general operating an army, think of opening up, like starting voice acting as opening up a whole other battlefront, like trying to invade a whole other country. Don't think of it as like send two of your soldiers and hope it'll be okay. Like you have to like really dedicate a lot of resources, and it was very time intensive, but the nice thing about voiceover is that it's a lot more individually oriented, and so you can really push it ahead in a way that you can't with on-camera acting, even just insofar as you can do you can do tens of auditions a day if you want to with voice acting. Whereas if you get like an audition a week for TV, you're a very successful actor, because none of my friends get that many auditions a week. So you can have a little bit more feel of control, like you're actually pushing your career forward within voice acting. And so now I do both. I do voice acting stuff pretty much as kind of a daily thing, because after a certain point you just build up enough where you get a booth at home, and you can kind of just have that be your kind of daily grind. And then I do TV film stuff or stage stuff when it comes up, less frequently, but still doing all of that different stuff.
Absolutely. And I also know that you have a podcast, right? It's Stone Cold Classic, where you talk about like old Hollywood classics, foreign movies, art house films as well.
Yeah. So the thing that kind of got me really wanting to even move to LA or just be in movies or act in general is I had started doing musicals and stuff in high school, but when I really started watching great films, I just had this feeling where I was like, I want to contribute to that in some capacity. Because I just had so many experiences of being so moved by great movies. And, there's a lot of great modern movies, and there's a lot of podcasts talking about those movies. But I find that, and there's also a lot of really bad movies and great podcasts talking about those bad movies. But a couple of my comedy buddies and I would get together all the time and watch these movies that were like old, like from the 40s, 50s, 60s, or foreign films, or just things that maybe young people aren't necessarily finding naturally through mainstream media, but the type of stuff that is incredible and life-changing if you have some sort of like cool older cousin to be like, hey, you gotta watch Persona or whatever. And so we kind of, after watching these movies on our own for a while and being like, we're all comedians, and one of them is a TV writer, one of them is a cartoonist, and I'm an actor. And so we were like, what if we record our post-movie conversations? So that's essentially what we do now. And so we do this podcast to try to introduce another generation of people to the type of movies that are really worth watching, but that you might not stumble across on your own.
Sounds really interesting. Might check it out, yeah.
Yeah, you should. It's actually really good. And I've listened to, I listened to your most recent episode, actually, and you had your friend as a special guest. It was Monica Padman, and you kind of gave a little bit of your history there, where you had said that you would kind of do, I guess you would do improv in, was it in her living room?
Yeah.
I think, or something for 8 years. And I was like, wow, that is absolutely incredible.
Yeah, Monica she's the co-host of the Armchair Expert podcast with Dax, is that his name? Dax Shepard? Is that his name? Okay. And he, but before she started doing that podcast, we were just improv teammates. And so we just did many years worth of shows for like an audience of 5 people, and we would do improv practices in her living room in her apartment for like a decade, and then you see some of these people, you're like, oh, like one of my teammates got a job writing for some sitcom, or one of them becomes Monica Padman, like famous podcast host. And you just kind of, if you stick around in the city long enough, your friends who you just did all this stuff with for free start all of a sudden like getting paid to do their entertainment and art stuff. And so it's exciting to kind of watch people get these things, and you all have such a shared history that you create through doing stuff for the love of it and not just for the money part of it. So yeah, it was fun to have her on the podcast.
Nice.
Yeah, and also it's just interesting to hear, because it sounds like you kind of have a similar start to David as well, where you kind of started with improv, and I hear this commonly when I talk to other, because I have friends that are actors as well, that are, either aspiring actors or they're working, and they also say the same thing. Like, they usually get their start in improv, kind of open acting classes. That's super interesting to me.
Yeah, I think that any sort of live stage performance is super useful, whether you're going to try to be an on-camera actor or a voice actor. Anything where you're going to act in a situation where there's not an actual audience there, it's really useful to have built up some instincts for how an audience might respond. So if you're doing a lot of the voice acting stuff you do, the other actors aren't even there with you. You're totally by yourself. Maybe there's like an engineer, maybe a director, and maybe there's like 2 other people just like hanging around eating snacks. And so you do something and you hope that it's going to be funny. You're not hearing any laughter, but you have to have some instinct of like, okay, back in the day when I would perform in front of an audience, would this type of thing feel like it would make people laugh? And sometimes it wouldn't make people laugh, and you'd learn from that too. You'd go like, oh, that didn't really work, and then you just kind of keep rolling. But it also builds up like a thick skin, so that if you do something that fails, it's not a big deal. Because every single session for voice acting or any type of acting, you're not going to do one take of every line and they're just like, you're a genius, moving on. They're always going to be like, can you do that again, but like louder, faster? And I didn't really believe it, so can you do it one more time? And then you go like, yeah, sure. And you have to just not care about that at all. And it's way easier to do that and not be afraid when you've performed for, a room of, whether it's 5 people or 200 people or 1,000 people or whatever. Then when you have to do it in front of 1 person or 2 people, it's just not as scary as when you're doing it in front of a full auditorium. So it's really useful to have those skills.
And to jump on the improv thing, especially the type that I think Daniel learned this also, that I learned, which is long form improv. This isn't the whose line is it anyway, get the jokes out as quickly as possible.
Absolutely.
Long form is more about building relationships, building characters, building story, not trying to be funny, just letting it come. And specifically what we learned is called truth and comedy. To me, it was the best acting class I took, because you're pulling from yourself. You're not trying to reach out and fake stuff or make stuff up. You're pulling from your own experiences and emotions, and that can do nothing but help with your acting in general, but especially with your voice acting. And now I think Daniel Griffin can back me up on this. Almost every audition we get says, they're not allowed to say improv anymore, but they say make it your own. Bring something else to it. So it's a tool set that can do nothing but benefit you. And on the other side, it's also fun. It's a great time. My happiest moments were not even necessarily on the improv stage, but the people that I would hang out with. I think every improviser will tell you, the funniest times are not on stage, but when you're hanging out with your friends at a bar or backstage or around, like when you guys are doing bits and trying to one up each other or just have fun. Like it's a community and it's a good time. And that for me, I haven't been around the theater for a long time, and I feel like I've actually suffered performance-wise because I haven't been working out and keeping sharp as much as I'd like to.
Yeah.
It's kind of like real life improv in a sort. It's best, yeah.
Absolutely.
It's kind of like real life, but still a little bit more towards improv, but connected with your friends and buddies. Sounds really interesting. Cool.
All right, so let's hop on over to Griffin here. So Griffin, just give us a little bit about your background with voice acting, how you started, and if it was something that you always wanted to do.
Yeah, I had a similar start. I started in theater at a very, very young age, but I kind of just did it because I thought it was fun. I didn't take it too seriously until around high school. That's when I started doing musical theater and choir. I started doing improv and one-act plays. And that's where I really fell in love with the art of acting and kind of figured out that, like, oh, this is something that, like, I wouldn't mind doing. Because even, like, the boring parts, like, in a musical, there's a week where called Tech Week, where in the lead up to that, they have to have a day where they block out all of the lighting, which means you have to be on stage in your spots, but you're doing nothing. The lighting guy is going through and programming the entire board to run for the show. And I just remember just having fun that day and joking with other people and keeping everybody, invested and focused and all that. And that was sort of the first realization that, like, oh, I think I can do this. Like, if the boring parts can be fun, then maybe I can do this. And I went to college and started studying computer science, thinking that's what I wanted to do. But I was also pursuing acting at the time. I had saved up a little bit of money, and I had this extra free time that you have in college. And I'd always been interested in voice acting ever since I was very young, watching cartoons and getting into anime. So I bought myself a microphone and just started going for, like, auditions that I found online and doing things like that. I ended up getting connected to a studio out in LA. I interned there for a little bit, met a casting director. They threw me a bone and gave me an opportunity to be in the show that ended up on Cartoon Network. And that was sort of the start of my professional career in voice acting. A year later, I made the permanent move to LA and started pursuing things. And it's been 4 years now, I think. But yeah, that's my background in acting and how I got into voice acting.
That's amazing. I actually went to university for computer science as well, and it did not go well. So I switched programs.
Yeah, I mean, it's a subject I was interested in, but it takes like I said with the theater, like, you've gotta kind of be there for the mundane and boring parts. And with computer science, it's a lot of just, like, scrolling through code and looking for a discrepancy and then debugging and testing and truncating your code into simpler algorithms and knowing a bunch of math that I just don't particularly care for, discrete mathematics and a lot of things that I was like, okay, I see these other people just staying up all hours of the night doing it, despite how difficult it is. I'm struggling to be there and to be present and to really care. So I think I should pour my time into something that I would actually, like, be all right with.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Currently, this is my daily life. Coding, debugging, problem solving, and fixing things. Yeah.
That's amazing. I just don't know why I bothered to do computer science because I'm such an artsy person. So it was kind of like I was denying myself that because I chose to do that. I did end up switching after, but it was kind of like I should have just went for it immediately instead. But I mean, everything happens for a reason.
Yeah, I had this idea in my head that I had to do something more practical so that I could facilitate the impractical thing. But now that I've done this for 4 years, I looking back, I'm like, no, it doesn't really work that way. I mean, you should have, as a creative person, I think you should have some pretty, like, down-to-earth, practical, conservative things you do, like in terms of your money and your daily routine and when you get up and go to sleep. But if you're going to pursue something creative, like, you have to pour all of your time and effort that you have to spare into that, because there's no straightforward, start here, move here, roll the dice,
Absolutely.
go to this place. It's pretty sporadic and all over the place, and you have no idea where you're going to end up in your career or how you're going to make that connection. So
Absolutely. I did take some acting classes. They were super enjoyable because I aspired to do acting. So I'm in Canada. I'm in Ontario. So most of the the acting roles are in Toronto. So I've traveled there to do multiple auditions. Haven't gotten anything yet, but it's a grind, right? That's the thing. You just have to do the audition, do the best you can, and then I treat it kind of like if I get something, then it's kind of like a surprise. You know what I mean? Like I try to leave and then not think about, oh man, I gave it my all and I think that I did a good job and I'm definitely gonna get it, because then it's kind of like I'm setting myself up for disappointment if I don't get it. So I just kind of, it's like out of sight, out of mind. I do it, I leave, and then if I don't get it, I get it. If I get something, I'm like pleasantly surprised.
yeah, I have friends or other colleagues who I'll talk to, and they'll be like, "Oh, I spent like an hour on that audition," and I'm like, that's a terrible idea. They're like, "What?" But I have to give it my all. It's like, yeah, but I don't think they mean it literally, because yeah, with voice acting, it's in any audition really. Like our job in a lot of ways. David and Daniel were talking about this. We have our space to do our auditions. And that's like 90% of our job. Like when we have sessions and we have recurring stuff, awesome. But, the majority of what we're doing is just submitting ourselves for potential work. And that's, but you have to kind of recognize, well, if that's the job, then that's it. Like it can't be, if you're holding out hope for every little thing you submit, it's not going to do anything for your confidence or your,
Absolutely.
Or your longevity, because you're going to submit for like 90% of the things you submit for, you're not going to get. I mean, and that's a good number. Like if you're booking 10% of what you're auditioning for, then hooray! Like good for you.
Absolutely.
But yeah.
Even if you book it, I'm just like, wow, I booked something. You know what I mean? Like, let alone if I end up getting it. So, I actually did do some auditions for voice work for it's Echo S mod for Final Fantasy VIII. Actually, I don't know if do you know Christian Sakanen? He's a voice actor as well, and he's the voice director actually for Suna Mods, which it's like a modding community for Final Fantasy games on PC, because you can download and install mods and which changes things to the games. So there were some roles available. So I did audition for a bunch of those. Unfortunately, I didn't get anything. But just going back to earlier, I feel like I did like these creature sounds. I'm one of those people, and there was nobody to tell me how to do this. So I'm just gonna go for it. So I kind of did some weird like creature sounds. I don't know. I can do weird things with my voice that I didn't even know that I could actually do till I started recording. I was like, wow. I was like, who knew? Okay. Anyways, so there's that.
That's one of the best parts about this, by the way, to interrupt, is discovering things that you can do. Like I still don't know all the things I can do yet, and that's kind of part of the exploration of the process. But when you figure out, oh wow, I just made that sound, I can do it again. That's a great feeling. So good for you.
Absolutely. And I know Vyzz also auditioned for the mod as well, and you actually ended up getting a role. So
I did, yeah. So at first, since we partnered up with Suna Mods, I mean the Cosmo Canyon Observatory community partnered up with them, and then we all got roles for NPCs in Cosmo Canyon. That's a place in the original Final Fantasy VII, and I ended up getting the innkeeper. Just a few lines. It's nothing big. Most of them are not really big, but a lot of Cosmo Canyon Observatory members ended up recording some lines for them. And then Final Fantasy VIII Echo S mod rolled around, and they started doing auditions and stuff. And I think I submitted for 16 NPCs just because it was fun. But at the beginning, it was pretty much certain that I will get the role for this German doctor Odin. He at least has a German accent, and Swiss German is pretty close to German, so it's pretty easy to provide this natural accent. And yeah, they were really intrigued by my take, and now I will be voicing Dr. Odin.
Nice.
Which I think he has a pretty extensive appearance in a certain section of the game. So it's not just a few lines. Maybe can be compared to Zhijie, I think, from the amount of lines. So from the top of my head. But yeah, it will be a while until recording starts, but I'm really looking forward to
Good
it.
for you.
Congratulations. That's great, man.
Thank you. Thanks. And I haven't uploaded yet, but I plan to upload my whole auditions, all 16 of them, in a small little video on my YouTube channel for everyone to enjoy, because there are a few very, very funny ones in there.
Wow.
Yeah, you did an incredible job. And it's, for me, I'm
Thanks.
thinking like the opportunity there to do something like this as well is giving us experience, you know what I mean? And I'm thinking while I'm recording these auditions, I was thinking, maybe I could do some voiceover or voice acting, you know what I mean? And I have these set up here for the podcast, so it just made sense to me. And it's easier because I can also just audition from home and I don't have to, drive to Toronto and do it in person. And it just seemed like something that I didn't even know that I actually would even like have the ability to be able to do this. So it's a great opportunity.
Yeah, same here actually. And Christian even told me that I would have the stuff that it takes for a voice actor, and I was very, very I don't know, taken aback a little bit because I never thought this would be the case. I'm not really a talking person. I don't know, it sounds weird, but apparently I did a great job. So let's see where it leads.
You did. I think I submitted 16 as well. And Christian wrote me and he said, well, you've got range. Didn't get a role, but that's okay.
You certainly do. You even tried to voice I think the big bad of Final Fantasy VIII.
I did actually.
Ultimecia.
You know what? I did quite a few
Yeah,
female
a
characters
female
as
voice,
well.
it was really good,
I
yeah.
did like 4 female voices. Yeah, I'm just
4 was
why
it?
not?
Okay.
Just do it. All right, guys. So thank you so much for sharing your background about how you got started with voice acting. We are now going to dive a little bit into your experience with Final Fantasy and Final Fantasy VII specifically. So did you guys know about Final Fantasy as a series before auditioning for your roles in Intermission? And also, have you played, Final Fantasy games before? And how about if you played actually Final Fantasy VII or VII Remake? So let's go over to Daniel first.
So I was aware of Final Fantasy 'cause it's just such a huge franchise, and when I was in high school, I was obsessed with the Kingdom Hearts games, and so I was aware of a little bit of crossover within those universes, but I'd never actually played any of the Final Fantasy games, proper. And then when I was auditioning for this, it had some sort of code name, so I didn't know what the game was until I literally showed up for the session. Like, even after I had gotten the job, I didn't know what it was.
Yeah.
So I was just like, oh, cool, I get to do this thing. All right, I'll show up. And so I showed up, and I was like, what is this, by the way? And they were like, oh, Final Fantasy. And I was like, oh, cool.
Wow.
Like that's exciting. And then you just kind of roll with it. And but yeah, it's always fun when you get to show up and you've heard of the thing that you're working on for that day. But no, I haven't played it. But I've since I've seen a lot of the footage of some of the cutscenes and things like that, and
Absolutely.
It looks incredible, and I know it's so known for its storytelling. So it's exciting to be part of a game that it takes such pains to develop that kind of world.
It's arguably the most renowned and popular JRPG franchise in history. So it's quite a big deal, I think, for you to, be in this game. And I think it's absolutely incredible. And, I hope that this, provides potentially the opportunity for you to voice even more characters in Final Fantasy, because you did an incredible job in episode Intermission. I really enjoyed your performance.
Thanks. Yeah, no, I would love to, and it's such a huge world that there's enough characters in there that maybe we can all maybe all 5 of us can show up in that universe. Who knows?
Hopefully,
yeah.
All right, so let's go over to Griffin. So same question. So your experience with Final Fantasy in general, and if you knew about your roles for Intermission before auditioning, and Final Fantasy VII, did you know about this game? Have you played it before?
Yeah, I also grew up playing the Kingdom Hearts game, so I don't know if that was I guess that would have been my introduction to like Final Fantasy characters, even and the ones from 7 specifically, because they have quite a presence in all of the Kingdom Hearts games. So that was sort of my intro. But as a kid, I grew up playing Final Fantasy III on the Nintendo DS, which
Nice.
didn't make its way out until many years later. Our 3 was 6 for for Japan. But I loved that game. That was my introduction to just the idea of what Final Fantasy was, with the heroes and the crystal and all of that. As for 7, 7 I was always aware of. It was the fan favorite of the series. But for whatever reason, I just kept missing it. It was hard to find physical copies of it for the PS1 when I was growing up. I grew up on the PS2, so I never got to play it on that platform. I played Final Fantasy X. Was less of a fan of that one, but my introduction properly to 7 was actually when I started acting. I ended up auditioning for the first game, the 7 Remake. I auditioned several times for, I think, most of the main cast and some of the supporting cast, and then ended up getting brought in to do some background voices for the game. So just characters throughout Midgar and some of the Shinra soldiers and different things like that. So so I got to be a part of the first game. Never got to play it. Just didn't end up grabbing it when it first came out. I want to say another game came out at the time, and I was like, sorry guys, I got to play that one. But I don't remember which one it was.
Resident Evil 2, I think, was around there.
It wasn't Resident Evil 2. I might have been late on another game, and I was like, I got to play this. But yeah, so I knew what it was when I got the auditions, just because I was like, oh yeah, like this is. I recognized some of the characters, and I was like, oh, okay. And I'm always sneaky. When I get an audition, I'll be like, all right, who is this? Click. And I'm like, I see what this is. So, and then the next round went out, and it was for characters I didn't really recognize, but I knew it was something to do with Final Fantasy. And I remember specifically auditioning for Zhijie and feeling comfortable in the role, and then getting it. It's really cool to be a part of the Final Fantasy universe, multiverse. Each of those games are very separated. But no, it's really, really cool. It's up there with just these long running JRPGs that are just renowned and super well known, and it's exciting. I've gotten to play a little bit of Intergrade, and I'm having a ton of fun with it.
Nice. You're in for a treat, definitely.
Yeah, for sure. I finished episode Intermission. It was incredible, honestly. And like I said, you guys did such an amazing job with these characters, and I don't know, it just feels like this world is so huge, and the ability to have these new characters added to this world, it's just, I think, a huge opportunity. And why not, have these new characters that add to the story and add to the world and just the lore there. And, like I said, I think you guys did an amazing job. And I do love these 3 characters. And I feel like I hope that we'll see them again, hopefully in the future, so that, you guys can, take up these roles again and be in the next, however many parts this series is. We don't even know at this point.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to hearing more Polk, Billy Bob, and Zhijie. And Nayo, of course, but she's not here, unfortunately.
All right, so let's move over to David. So David, same question. Your history with Final Fantasy and potentially Final Fantasy VII specifically. Did you know about your role before, I guess you were auditioning for it? Like, did you know it was for Billy Bob and for Final Fantasy?
Sure. So I'll start my history. Like, as Daniel said, you can't be a gamer and not know Final Fantasy. And I've been gaming since the Atari 2600, but there were always gaps where, like, I didn't have a Nintendo console until the GameCube, so I missed out on 1 through 6. I didn't get my first PlayStation until well after 7, 8, 9, those came out. So I think my first actual game that I played was Final Fantasy X on the PlayStation 2.
Okay.
And then didn't play another one again, and then so I wouldn't necessarily call myself like calling yourself a fan of something. I have too much respect for that to say that I was a fan of Final Fantasy. Again, I was aware of it, and obviously respect any franchise that's been around that long and is so loved. You have to respect it. The audition, I honestly can't remember if I did a first round of auditions where I may have also auditioned for Polk and a couple others. I don't remember. Again, I'm old. I forget things easily. But I did get my audition.
I feel
said Billy Bob. It had a character description, and it actually, I don't know if this was a mistake on their part or the intention. It had the code name, but it also said Final Fantasy VII. So I didn't know in what context. The remake had already been out. So my first assumption was, okay, maybe this is for part 2. I don't know. So I did it and sent it in, and a couple months later got the part. And I'm trying to, I didn't ask during the recording if it was for a DLC or for a second part. I just did it, and then didn't really think about it again until they made that press release where they announced the cast and explained what it was. And like, oh, okay, we're the first DLC. That's pretty awesome. So, yeah, that's. I think I answered your question.
Yeah, you did. Thank you so much.
Okay, good. Sure. But just to tack on to them, like, yeah, being a part of this universe, as we call them now, like number one for me would be like to do anything Star Wars related, like just to be in that, but to also get a chance, especially early on in my career, to be a part of such a loved and respected franchise. Like, I don't take this lightly. I have friends who are fans of the game who are really like, you don't understand how big of a deal this is. So I'm appreciative. Yeah. I'm appreciative of opportunities like this to talk to fans and people like you who love the game so much. So I'm kind of like really kind of enjoying this process. And yeah, obviously, I think we'd all love to come back and do more stuff, but it's not really up to us.
Absolutely.
If you fans really love you guys really love Avalanche,
yes,
guys, let Square know.
Yes, absolutely.
Avalanche.
Yeah.
And it's such a, like you had said previously, it's like a huge community, right? There's like these games are huge themselves, and they're incredible games. They have a huge following as well, and they have these huge communities where, you know, people like us, I mean, we created this podcast around this game, and we spend our time not only playing the game, but also spending time, you know, doing the work and the research and analysis. That's more Vyzz, because he's got, you know, apparently this huge magnifying glass when he slows down every single trailer to like 1 millisecond and picks everything out. But you know, we have this community, and it's a huge community, and it's a hugely accepting community as well. And I think that it's absolutely incredible to have you guys as part of this community, and for you to take the time out today to come and also just talk to us here on the podcast, you know, and being so open to that is really, you know, it means a lot to Vyzz and I, and to, you know, our listeners as well, and the community, because it's
and I gotta say, sorry to interrupt, but I'm kind of glad that, and I think the other guys will back me up in this, is when you go in the studio to do a role, you're just focused on your character, the scenes, your line, you're getting it right. If I had in the back of my mind, holy crud, this is Final Fantasy VII, and the amount of attention that it was going to get, it would have, you know, I would have froze. Like, you know, we did our job and it's out there, and now comes, oh God, I hope, you know, this community, I hope we don't mess up this thing that they love. You know, like there is that little pressure about that. And luckily, I think that's maybe also one of the reasons they don't tell us necessarily right away, because they don't want that, you know, clouding our performance at all. But, you know, it is a thing. It's like, you guys love this so much, and I personally don't want to be the person to mess it up for you guys.
Oh my gosh, no.
Fair point, yeah. So some fans can really be heavy on the mistakes made, but they mostly direct their anger at Square Enix themselves, or the developers.
I hope that's true. I mean, like, there's too many horror stories of voice actors getting harassed and everything just because
True,
the
I've
character
heard
didn't come
from
out
as
the way
well,
the fans want, and that's not that anger is directed towards the wrong person. I mean, the voice actor's hired to do a
absolutely.
job. They're
Definitely.
directed a certain way, and they give the best work. They're rarely the person at fault if things don't come out the way you expect. If that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely.
Mm, it
And
does,
it's
yeah.
kind of like a double-edged sword with this, because like Final Fantasy fans, we love Final Fantasy, but some of us like might love it a little too hard,
Impossible.
And that's like anything too online, especially too with the internet. It's Twitter, it's like that, and yeah, and the same thing with us. I just try to focus on the positive and try to give back to this community and do the best that
Same.
we can to just provide quality content for our listeners in the community. And people say what they say, and I just keep going. Basically, just kind of push forward with that.
Good. Well, I hope most of the community is as understanding and as nice as you guys are.
And if not, then just avoid them. Try to avoid them, because
Okay. All right.
I'm really lucky that my community is a really nice one. We barely have any troublemakers there. Everyone is nice, so we can have chat with each other and poke fun at each other and talk about everything in a calm manner and discuss it. And it's really, really good. But I've heard about squabbles, yeah, as we said, on Twitter and other places. There are certain forums that contain a few bad apples, let's say.
Mm-hmm.
Sure.
But that's everywhere.
Yeah,
You can't
absolutely.
you can't avoid this probably. But if the most vocal are positive, and if the majority that you see on the internet and in discussions and on podcasts that are fair, let's say, then it's good, I guess. It's what we want.
Absolutely. All right, so just moving on here. So we are going to talk a little bit about our episode intermission questions for you guys. So I just have a few questions here. So did you have contact with other intermission cast members before, during, or after recording? And based on, I guess, just when you guys had arrived, I'm going to say no.
Beforehand, we didn't.
Okay.
No, because again, all these projects are so secretive.
Yeah.
Most of the video games we work on, we don't know what we're getting into exactly until we get there, and we're all recording separately for
Okay.
time management purposes and just ease of production, because we're doing sometimes hundreds of thousands of lines.
Oh, right.
So after I finished recording and the first trailer dropped, I recognized some of the voices in the cast. So I reached out and congratulated friends of mine who I recognized from Intermission. But other than that, no, we've all sort of been huddled away in our own little boxes and homes for the past year and a half.
I know.
So no, we haven't gotten too much time to interact with each other outside of something like this.
So did you guys did you record your auditions remotely and then you submitted them to Square? Or I guess, did you do that, and then if they told you got the role, and then did you have to go to a studio, right?
So basically, yeah, I think everyone just probably recorded on their own for the audition, and just like normally you send it to an agent, the agent sends it to the whatever production is actually putting it together, and then when you get cast, you just have a call time. So you go in, and like some people would have multiple sessions, some people would just have like 1 or 2 sessions, and you go in and you're the only actor in the studio, and you're just doing your lines, and you're watching video of the scenes
Right.
or whatever's happening. Sometimes there was no video, but you're getting a sense of what it will eventually become a part of, but you're not actually the way that you would if you were like on, a TV show or something where you're there's other actors and you're interacting with people. Usually maybe you're hearing a little bit of if it's something like, if it's a pre-existing character, maybe you hear like the original like Japanese actor, but otherwise you're kind of just doing your own thing, and then hoping it all kind of comes together when they edit it together, because a lot of times you're doing dialogue with people that you're recording totally separately, and you're just relying on the voice directors to kind of patch it all together and make sure that if someone if someone's reaction line is like, "Why are you so angry at me?" You hope that like the thing that came right before that is someone being angry. Otherwise, it just like won't make any sense. So it's a lot of it's just trust and just committing to whatever the voice directors are asking you to do, because they're the ones kind of overseeing to make sure it all makes sense.
Yeah, for sure, and they're also in charge. They know how things have to be done, and you don't. So you have to trust. Otherwise, you can't really work, I guess.
Yeah. I think some productions don't have voice directors, right? So I guess it's more open to your interpretation with the role when you're recording, or that's what I've heard anyway.
Well, some smaller productions, and this is true of like commercials too. Like sometimes you'll have someone directing you. Sometimes you're literally just, they say record on your own, and there's literally not a person in the world listening to you record. And so you're just in your home studio recording, a bunch of takes of the lines, and then you send them off. And sometimes they'll have redirects, or they'll ask you for pickups on certain lines. But sometimes they're just like great, and they just wanted options. That happens all the time with like any sort of narration, like corporate narration stuff, or commercials where you just do like 3 takes of the commercial and they're like great. But for bigger productions where there's much more money and media and all these things at stake, then usually there's a voice director who's kind of overseeing it, and they're a little more hands-on with the process, and they'll bring you into an actual studio rather than have you do it at your own home studio. And so there's just like much more involved when you're dealing with a bigger property, I guess, like Final Fantasy.
So did you go to the Square Enix like headquarters in Los Angeles to record, or was it like a separate studio?
It was a separate studio,
a
voice. It was a voice recording studio that does lots of other games and commercials, and they just are kind of like an all-purpose recording studio. And they had taken over one of the rooms to be kind of like the Final Fantasy room.
That's amazing. So next question is, did any of you audition for other intermission characters, or just like the one that you ultimately ended up receiving?
This is David. I like I said, I don't remember, and I was trying to go through all my old auditions and emails and everything, because I have a vague memory that I did, because the email said that I got for Billy Bob said we're doing a second round of auditions for Billy Bob, and I just like couldn't remember if I had done it before or not, but I'm just going to go with and say that Billy Bob was the only one I got, just because that'll increase my batting average to say that I didn't get rejected for Polk. So yeah, I think Billy Bob was the only one I had to go for.
Yeah, I remember auditioning for Sonon as well.
Oh, okay.
I can't remember if I auditioned. I want to say I auditioned for Billy Bob and Polk, but I don't remember what my audition. I don't remember auditioning for them. But I do remember auditioning for Sonon.
I don't think I auditioned for other ones, but I'm looking up now on my computer since I'm in front of my computer. Yeah, I don't think so. But again, like I was saying, is like it was code names, so
I see.
you're not really paying attention to what you're auditioning for, because you might be doing 20 auditions a day or whatever. So you're just like, oh, you see the same thing come up, and you're like, oh, I guess it's multiple roles for this game, and you're just not really overthinking it. So yeah, definitely. Oh no, okay. I've found I auditioned for Billy Bob.
Nice.
I auditioned for Vyzz or Vyzz.
Yeah.
That's
I
awesome.
think that might be Sonon. There's a Sonon audition for me out there in the world. I think, and I think that's it. So yeah, but it's just they're all. When you're auditioning for them, it's literally no different than the McDonald's commercial. Then you also audition for that day. It's sort of like you're just throwing out a bunch of stuff, and then you'd never think about any of it again. Like, I have no memory of doing any of those auditions. I probably, if I listened to them back, I'd be like, I don't remember saying those words. It's sort of you throw a bunch of stuff out, and when something comes back to ask you to actually be a part of it, it's just a very pleasant surprise, and then you kind of commit to it from there.
And I'm going to take from that I beat out Daniel for the role of Billy Bob, so that makes sense.
So and you're gonna say that after you just 1 second earlier were like, I'm gonna say I didn't audition for Polk.
I'm looking for it. I can't find auditions, but if you want to say that, yes, you can say you beat me out for Polk. But I'm holding my look. this is all I got, Daniel.
Look, they sent you the audition for Polk, and you were like, "Nah, I prefer Billy."
Yeah, I mean that
You
does
turned down the
happen.
Polk
We
audition.
get auditions for a whole bunch of characters, and if I don't feel it, I'll
Yeah.
skip it. But I don't know why I wouldn't. I don't know. I don't remember. I'm
That's
sorry.
amazing.
I'm old.
You were born to be Billy.
I really was. So I'm just gonna go with that.
Definitely. But what I find really interesting is when listening to the voices in the game itself, just from who they are and how they look like, I would have swapped the voices just from my perspective. But kind of now it also makes sense because Final Fantasy really, really tries to subvert expectations a lot. So I think that's what they were going for, and it really worked out.
Absolutely.
Because if you read the description for Billy Bob, it says he's the most experienced one, but he doesn't show it. He just pretends to be just some random guy that he isn't, clearly. So it does make sense that he doesn't really sound like what he probably looks like or something.
Yeah, and I've since seen the final product, and it's one of those cases where, okay, the choices I might not necessarily have made as an actor, but I was directed this way, and I trust the director, I trust the people behind the game. This is what they want, and I hope I gave them what they wanted. And yeah, you kind of have to divorce yourself from that. You have to divorce yourself from what you expect or think that you think it should sound like versus what they want. And hopefully you give them, the perfect jobs are when those things mesh, but
yeah.
In this case, it was, you want him to sound a certain way, great, and then it's my job to make him do that, and hopefully I did that.
Oh, for sure, yeah, because you could also sense that he really cares about the people. He's a really good dude, and it showed in the voice, I guess.
Thanks.
Absolutely. Did it say in the character description, I guess, that he drinks a lot? Because that came out.
He drinks a lot, but never gets drunk. He drinks everyone under the table.
Wow.
And even some NPCs say that.
Yeah, it basically said that he's as comfortable, I don't know, building explosive as he is throwing one back at the bar, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's where he gets his intel, after all.
All right, Vyzz. So it looks like you have some questions here.
Yes, I also have some questions. What was your favorite line in the Intermission DLC? If you remember, that is.
Putting you on the spot here.
I'm tied between two. I do love telling Yuffie that she reeks of trouble.
That's a good one.
That was a fun one for me. And then I love when I'm distracting the guards. I'm just like, look, a Moogle. Yeah, the other way. I thought that was the silliest thing.
It's really silly, but it worked.
It's amazing.
Those two were definitely my favorite.
Yeah.
So I have almost no memory of any of the lines, but I am looking up. I have the audition sides in front of me right now, and so the first line listed is, "Yeah, he got here 3 days ago," which to me is a really meaningful line. I just think that speaks.
Yeah, but who are you talking about? Do you remember who you're talking about?
That's really a question for the voice director. They gotta put that together. That's a post-production question more than for me. But yeah, when I saw that, I was like, oh yeah, he got here 3 days ago. Wow, that sort of tells me everything I need to know. And so I just rolled with that. So yeah, that's meaningful. I mean, who could forget the other the famous line? So, bring any luggage with you? So that's a good one,
I love that one.
Oh, right. Yeah, that's true.
My favorite moment, and this is credit to the game makers and the editors and everything, was when she shows up, she goes through her whole speech again for the second time in the game. And, in Meadows Avalanche, we got this. And there's that pause where we're all just staring at her like, okay, you're weird. And then I follow it up with, wow, you're ready to rumble. So I like that. And then for some reason, obviously it sticks out is, ow, my teeth.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, eating that thing.
Yeah.
Eating those beans.
This leads into the next question. Would you, as a voice actor, not as the one you played at, eat the Dachau bean that you're given?
Well, not that I've seen
Absolutely.
that she's the only human who can apparently eat them without severe physical pain. but I like to think I'm a explorative eater, so I would try it.
If you can swallow it whole, I would definitely would not chew it. But if you could just like take it like you're taking an Advil or something,
Yeah, maybe.
then maybe that way. But I don't know. I mean, but if your stomach can't break it down, it's gonna be tough coming out on the other end.
Yeah.
Yeah, I just would maybe play it safe and just let Billy Bob take it.
Yeah.
I mean, hey, I trust Yuffie. She's given us beans.
Yeah, Yuffie, she's hungry, so give her all the beans.
Yeah.
Of course, we were the dumb ones who puts a bean in our hand, and of course we're dumb. We stare at each other and then just put it in our mouth without asking any questions.
Yeah. Interestingly, Zhijie doesn't eat it, but
Yeah, he's a smart one.
No.
Yep.
I wised up. I was like, I don't trust you. You see,
Yep.
There's something about you.
can't put my finger on it, but I'll.
Yeah. Or
can
just
tell.
saw the others writhing in pain, so
Yeah.
better not.
That's so interesting because they all tried to bite into it, but
Yeah.
I guess why not just, swallow it whole?
We're not the smartest in Avalanche.
All right, so moving on to our next question. So if you were your own character in Midgar, would you be playing Fort Condor? So Fort Condor is the minigame that was kind of revised in this version of episode Intermission. It's a minigame from the original. I don't know if you guys have played the original Fort Condor minigame in the original game, but if, you today, and you were in Midgar, would you play it?
Probably.
I think I would just be trying to get
probably.
food. I mean, I don't. I think from what I can tell of the world, it's unlikely that I'm in the 1%. So I'm just gonna be like, oh man, how are we gonna eat today?
Yeah, you have bigger fish
true,
to fry.
true,
Yeah,
That's
you
true.
don't have time
I have no
for-
fish to
for
fry.
fun
Actually,
games. No
when you
fish to
think
fry.
about it.
You're thinking about fish to fry. But
Exactly.
From what little I've it looks like you don't have a choice. Like you have to play Fort Condor if you live
Right?
in that area, right?
Absolutely.
Group pressure, right?
Mhm.
Peer pressure.
group pressure. Ooh, so yeah, I guess I probably if I was forced, then sure, I guess I would play. But I think otherwise maybe I'd be like, trying to start some sort of. I'd probably be focusing on like my battle skills.
Yeah.
I think I'd want to do that more. Like I'd want if I was gonna get really good at like a mental strategy betting game or get really good at swordsmanship. I think I'd want to like put in the time with the blade.
Yeah,
Better join the neighborhood watch.
that makes sense.
Yeah, exactly.
All right, and the next question is the process of finding your character's voice in episode Intermission. Just kind of talk about the process, I guess, of finding this voice for this character. Obviously, there was a voice director that gave you direction, but is there any characters that may have inspired you to give the performance that you gave?
I just kind of followed the character description. For my character, he was just, kind of laid back and kind of just, whatever. All right, cool.
Yeah.
So I just kept it. And they said he was a younger guy, so I just kept it to my voice and then just changed the attitude, which is what I do for most things that aren't like cartoons or
Right.
or like sort of out there animation. I don't do much in terms of a voice. I think of it just more as like, okay, if I'm playing this character on camera, like how am I, how am I how do I move? How do I stand? Like what's my posture? How do I kind of what face do I wear when I, talk to other people and face the world? And that was just sort of my approach to my character.
Yeah, I think for me, it was a similar deal. It's like when you're playing a sort of teenage-aged person, that gives you some clues as to, the parts of your voice that you should allow to come out. Also, like your diction, like the way
Right.
that you might not sound as properly educated. Like even when we did, like I had never met the voice actor that plays Sonon before,
Right.
but we did an interview with him a week ago.
Yeah.
And his voice is just ridiculous. Like it's just so precise and so interesting and so like careful and kind of even when he's speaking off the cuff. And so that communicates so much more worldly wisdom that would be totally inappropriate for someone like Polk, who's like, the whole point of him is that he's like the little brother of the crew who's kind of just around and trying to fit in, but he's like young and he likes his board game. And so I think that being aware of what qualities you naturally have in your voice that you can bring across, whether you naturally sound young or old or educated or not or whatever, you can emphasize those things. And then other than that, I think a lot of it comes from just the scenes themselves.
Right.
So like if you're in some sort of battle-oriented scene, then you're thinking about like, okay, I'm the young kid who's like doesn't have probably a lot of world experience. So if I'm in a battle, this is probably my first battle. So what's that going to be like? Because it's different than someone who spends all their time in the military. And if I'm hanging out with a bunch of people who are older than me and we're all just sitting around talking, maybe I want their attention, or maybe I want to kind of ingratiate myself or kind of make them laugh. But I'm definitely not going to be leading the group because that's just isn't my group role. So you're kind of taking all these clues from the way the scenes are written, and you kind of use that to inform your confidence level as a character and all these different things that can go into the sound.
And for me, like we had the character description and so forth to go off of, and and I'm looking at the audition now, and it said his vocal quality should sound as laid back and casual as his personality. As his personality, some texture and vocal fry is welcome. So, and they also sent reference of a similar type of character, and I also I think sent me the Japanese lines to kind of play off of, which is good and bad. It gives you kind of a sense of what they're going for, but you still kind of bring yourself into it. And so I just kind of launched into it, and the voice went naturally a little bit higher. And I gave them one read where it was just my voice and just interpreting kind of what I thought he was. And then I did another one where he was more slacker, kind of California surfery type voice to it. And then I booked it, and I didn't know which one they wanted until I got into the booth. And I actually had to ask. I said, "I'm sorry, excuse me. I did 2 takes. Which one do you want?" And they played back my audition and said, "That there it is. That's we want the first one you gave us." And then worked a little with the director just to kind of find the right tone and nuance to it. And then we were off and running. So that was kind of how our process went. It's a little difficult when you get these auditions and you don't have kind of the things that most actors want, which is the motivations, the wants, those kind of things, because it's very hard to act a description. You can't really portray a character description. You really have to, it's motivations and emotions and stuff. So in that kind of instance, you just make a choice. If it feels right, go with it. The only wrong choice is no choice. So that's kind of how I worked it.
And I've heard that before as well, about asking, like, what is the truth of the scene? What is happening in the scene? To get an understanding of, I guess, what the character's current situation is in the scene, so you can kind of put your mind, inside of the character. Like, what would they be thinking? What would I be thinking, if I was in this situation and this is what was happening to me as a person? And then you kind of go from there and work with that. And yeah, absolutely. I think that's an incredible strategy going into it. All right, guys. So now moving on to our next part of the podcast here, we are going to be asking you some questions from our listeners. All right. Our first question, which was submitted by the wonderful Remake. So she is asking, has anything changed for you since the release of Final Fantasy VII Remake, Intergrade, and episode Intermission? Have you watched any people playing the game and seen like what the reception of your character was? And obviously you kind of touched on this a little earlier about how, you had to watch people play the game because you either don't have a PS5 or you weren't able to play the game. So have you seen people's reaction to, your portrayal of the character?
I actually watched both Susie and Alex separately stream the game. Alex, I have to give him a little bit of a hard time because it took about 40 minutes to technically get it working. But, I didn't want to interfere too much with their streams because it was really them. But I enjoyed watching it and seeing people really. They showed a lot of love to Susie, and she deserves it. She carries this thing on on her shoulders, and she did a really, really great job. And you're watching this really nice, like almost quiet girl playing the game, and then you listen to her acting, and she's just a powerhouse. So, as far as personal life changing, no, other than I get to do things like this, which I haven't done before.
Absolutely.
But other than that, no, everything's still pretty much the same.
Yeah, similar. I think it's like the changes are just you have a few more people reach out online, or a couple. Like I've had a couple friends who I didn't know were big Final Fantasy heads, who then just will message me and be like, "You're in this? What?" Like, whoa! And so that's always fun when someone from non-acting life appreciates something that you are doing in the acting part of your life. But outside of that, I mean, you just get back to auditioning and get back to your other sessions and all that kind of stuff. But it's fun to see when fans and friends enjoy your work, and it's fun to do this kind of stuff and meet some new people that are involved in making this kind of work.
Yeah, I've got a lot of friends who are huge anime and JRPG nerds, so they were very excited to. Some of them knew it was me before the official announcement was made, so some of them messaged me, and I had to be like, "Oh, I don't know," or just say nothing.
Like, really?
I had to plead the fifth on that one. Yeah, it doesn't. I don't know. It doesn't sound like me, but all right. Although I've had that with other games. I've had some. I think when was it Smash Brothers? Yeah, someone thought I was Marth, and I was like, "That's clearly not me." They're like, "It's got to be you." I get that sometimes when a game will come out. Someone will be like, "You're in this, right? You're in Code Vein." I'm like, no, I wish. But thanks.
I get that with commercials sometimes too. People will be like, I heard you in a Domino's commercial. I'm like, you heard the guy who takes all my work in a Domino's commercial. Like whoever beats me out for all the Domino's commercials. Like, but I don't know who sounds like me who gets them. But it's funny when that happens.
I don't get that a lot, but I'm looking forward to it.
Perfect. Thank you guys so much for answering that question. We have another question here from one of our listeners, Tyler. So Tyler would like to know if you interacted with the Japanese voice cast at all.
No, I haven't. At least.
No. Aside from just being inspired by their work, because they played their stuff for us in sessions, and so that they did the performance first. We're basically doing our own kind of version of that. But yeah, a lot of properties that either are first made either in Japan or Korea or China or even like European stuff. Anytime you're dubbing something, you're influenced, of course, by the people that did it first. But the interesting thing about this particular game is it's not like a true dubbing thing, because the mouth movements weren't already animated. So even though we had the voices, the original voice performances in our ears, we could still kind of do our own thing, and then they would animate the mouth movements of the visual characters to what we did. So there was a little more flexibility than there'd be in like a true dubbing of like a TV show or something.
Okay.
Yeah, that definitely helped, I guess.
All right, and another question here for Dan. So our question is from Peeps Nibbles, and she would like to know, I guess, how you started your podcast. So we did talk a little bit about your podcast earlier on in the episode, but how exactly did you get started?
How did we start? Well, it was one of those things that I think a lot of people started podcasts during the quarantine, during the pandemic, because it's a way to stay in touch with your friends, and for people who perform, who are used to doing live performance, I missed feeling like I was making something that an audience would interact with or see, and I missed comedy. So even though the podcast is just like me and my two comedy buddies making each other laugh, it's still, for me, it's an audience of two, and it just happens to be my two friends, and then they're making me laugh too. So it kind of felt like I was getting back in touch with doing live comedy again. So just started it during the podcast with friends who I thought who we all have worked together for so long, so we have a rapport. We already had a shared interest in movies, and we wanted a good excuse to watch like the great movies that are sometimes we wouldn't go out of our way to watch. And so then we just started it, and that's all really it takes. It really takes just it's more about just having the want to do it, and then the technical side is not that hard. You can learn that. It's more just about making sure that you want to keep doing it.
Yeah, absolutely. Unfortunately, at this point in the podcast, Griffin had to leave due to a previous commitment and was not able to answer the final listener question. So there is another question here from Peeps Nibbles as well. So apparently she heard about this hilarious bathroom story or something, and she was asking if you can kind of give us the rundown about that story.
So we would show up, I think it was the same for everybody. We would show up at the studio. We would be greeted by a very nice person to kind of show us, okay, here's this and this. And then if you need it, we have a dressing room for you. And the dressing room just happened to be the woman's bathroom. And I think I'm sure it was the same room for everybody, but our names were on the door. And we had the full run of a woman's bathroom all to ourselves. It made us feel, for me, it was the first, like I've never had a trailer or any kind of, that kind of thing. It made me feel kind of special.
And I'd been to this studio before for other things, not during quarantine time. So like this is a pandemic situation.
Yeah.
Like they wouldn't have done this if it was not for the pandemic, because I've definitely been there and it's just a bathroom, right? But because of the pandemic, they had cleared out the entire studio so that like one actor at a time can come in, even though there's like 7 different booths. They're not running any of them. They're just like running one at a time. And so you come in, they take your temperature and all this stuff, and they're just like, and we have a bathroom, and it's entirely, it literally is a sign on the door. It's like, you're the only one allowed in this bathroom. Yeah. And so it was.
Oh my gosh!
It was special, and I'll never forget that bathroom. and I'll probably now that the quarantine is kind of ending, I'll probably never end up in that bathroom again. If it's a women's bathroom, like chances are, I mean, never say never, but chances are I probably won't be back there again.
Oh my gosh, I could just imagine you like going in and your name's on this specific bathroom, and you're like, wow, I get my own bathroom. Wow, this is.
I made it. Exactly. I finally made it.
This is why I did this.
Yeah. Yep. I went to drama school for this moment.
Absolutely. All right, so we're going to just ask you some general questions here. So have any of you ever voice acted characters from other video games?
Yeah, I have. So I play Ezreal in League of Legends, and I've done smaller games and smaller characters and stuff. The 2 biggest ones I'd say are League and this, I would say. Yeah.
First off, like, massive props to you being Ezreal in League of Legends. Like, I'm horribly jealous of that.
Thanks, man.
You can only see me in 2 other games. One that isn't even available anymore. Like, my first game was one line in something called Sea Fortress Epic Battle of Fleet. I don't know, some sea battle game that doesn't exist anymore. But I'm also a couple NPCs in Genshin Impact.
Nice.
Oh, nice.
And that's it so far.
That's awesome. So do any of you play or watch media that you've voiced in general? I know that obviously you've talked about, with Final Fantasy, but in general, anything, like, do you tend to watch it or not?
I dove into Genshin when it came out and gave it a good solid month, but oh my god, that game is huge and I've fallen behind, and it's just that I don't have as much time to game as I would like to, having a day job and a family and everything, so the gaming moments are precious, but
absolutely.
And then again, if you're saying, do I play stuff I'm in? That's my only other option. That, and now I can't even play Intergrade because I don't have a PS5. But
right.
So, I'm sure Daniel sits at home and plays Ezreal like all the time.
Yeah, and even if I'm not playing, I created a podcast that's just my voice on loop, so I just walk around listening to my own performances, going like, wow, look at what I did.
I believe that wholeheartedly.
So Yeah, so I watch. I don't have a problem watching or listening to stuff that I did, because after a certain point, especially through doing just so many auditions, you just end up hearing your own voice so much that you lose that kind of feeling of like, oh, I hate what I sound like. You just become so desensitized to it. I think I played a lot of video games when I was in high school. I don't play as much anymore. I think it's just busier, and with jobs and life and stuff. It's hard to keep doing that. The couple times that I've watched, the couple times that I relate to just like playing something that you're in or watching something that you're in, is I did a few episodes of the show Arrested Development when it was like for doing its first Netflix season, and that was a show I was obsessed with in college. And so even if I hadn't acted in it, I 100% would have been watching it. So that was really like that. And I had done an episode of The Office too, and that was a similar thing where I was like,
nice.
oh yeah, and so where I was like, if I would have probably watched this even if I wasn't in it, but the fact that I'm in it that makes it kind of crazy, because you're showing up to act in something that you know what the set looks like because you've watched the show. So those are the closest that I kind of relate to that idea. And yeah, it's certainly weird. And also it definitely breaks the show for you in a certain way, because you're just like, oh, like they're just people on a set who we ate lunch together, and it just like it makes everything very normal instead of being this like mythical TV land world.
Yeah, I was obsessed with The Office for a while, so I have to go back and watch it because I want to see you on The Office. I've already seen you, but I want to go back now, after like having this opportunity to talk with you, and just watch it again.
Do you know which episode I did, or have you?
No, I don't know.
Okay, so I can guide you, so you don't have to just like search all around. Do you remember in the 9th season, the last season of the show, the Halloween episode? At some point, the a cappella group Here Comes Treble comes to visit the office, and so I was the main guy in that group.
I remember.
So
that.
I'm the one that like who's kind of hosting that show and talking to Andy and all that kind of stuff. Yeah.
Nice, that's cool.
I totally understand what you mean, though. For me, it's kind of similar. I don't know if you feel this way, Vyzz, but just, being in our own content and then like hearing our voices, we kind of have to kind of get past that. You know what I mean? After a while, because I'm just thinking, I just feel bad for people because they have to hear my voice for that long, especially like our spoiler cast episodes. Sometimes they're about 4 hours long. And I'm like, every time at the end, I'm like, you know what? I just want to apologize to all the listeners out there that you had to listen to me for like 4 hours, And my friends are like, how can you hear yourself for that long? Especially too when I'm editing. And I'm like, you know what? You just have to kind of just put it out of your mind. I can't help what I sound like. This is the voice I have, So I'm just working with what I got, okay?
Yeah. It's self-acceptance. I mean, that's so much what acting is you have to, in order to act on stage, you have to have some belief that whatever it is that you're bringing to the table is worthy of an audience watching. And so you have to just be like, all right, I'm going to do my best to own what I have and just try to maximize that for the sake of this story, and that's the best you can do.
And hopefully they want what you got, like this is what I got, and if you want it, okay.
Yeah, and if they don't, there's so much other stuff that they could be watching or listening to, and I advise them to change the channel.
So I went for a role in Dota 2. I didn't get it, so go play League.
Yeah, exactly.
Because I'm in League. Oh my God. So, what's your favorite piece of media in general? Obviously, Daniel, like you have your podcast with movies, like talking about the Hollywood classics or the golden era of Hollywood. So, what's your favorite piece of media?
And also, not even just Hollywood movies, but it's like the stuff from the foreign films are just so good. And I think people get so intimidated. It's the same way that, like, Final Fantasy is a Japanese game. But, it doesn't, obviously, like, you have English-speaking voices that then get put in, like we did. So it makes it more accessible because you don't necessarily have to read the subtitles and all that kind of stuff. But just as great video games are made not here, there's great movies made not here as well, and it's so worth watching them even though there are subtitles, and especially because a lot of foreign films, they're not they don't have the same pressure to have to make hundreds of millions of dollars in box office. So they're way more able to take huge risks and do really weird stuff that's really eye-opening and cool. So for me, my favorite media stuff is usually those kind of old movies. So I love Ingmar Bergman. I love Kurosawa.
Oh, nice.
Of like modern directors, I love Werner Herzog. Obsessed with him. Obsessed with David Lynch. I just saw last night my first movie back in theaters. Seeing something back in theaters. I saw at a Revival Theater in L.A. They were playing Paul Thomas Anderson's The Master. And that was so fun to be back with an audience and see that in a big screen. So all the people that are really trying to use movies to make art as much as they can. I'm always so thrilled by that.
I'm generally what people would call a basic. I kind of like all the things that most people like. I like to think that I can extend myself, and same like the Kurosawas that like heavily influenced me when I was younger. Stanley Kubrick. But the movies from my youth are really like your Star Wars, your Ghostbusters, your Blues Brothers, like the comedies of the 80s. That first Saturday Night Live cast, once they broke out into films, is really kind of what sits home with me. And then I've also been trying to get back into music. Like when you're in a band and it doesn't go the way you necessarily plan. Like I kind of had a sour taste in my mouth about music for a minute. And so I'm trying to slowly find things that I like. I always have the stuff that I fall back on. I'm a big soul music fan. Otis Redding, Ray Charles, the early rap of, Tribe Called Quest and Beastie Boys and Run DMC and those kind of things. So as far as I'm trying to find current stuff to like, and I thought, we all do this when we're kids, or say we're never gonna be like our parents and not know what's cool and hip. And I became my parents, and I don't know what's cool and hip. And I can either be okay with that, or I can try to learn like what the kids are listening to these days.
Yeah, absolutely. I totally agree with you on that one. I'm a big music fan as well, and I feel like I've kind of fallen off the bandwagon with like what everybody's listening to. I just kind of listen to things that I enjoy listening to and that I grew up with, you know what I mean? And I said the same thing. I'm like, I'm never going to turn into my parents. I'm going to listen to everything all the time. But I guess it's just maybe my taste has changed, or I don't know. It's just there's so much music being made, especially today with technology. It's more accessible. And with things obviously like Spotify, it's a lot easier for people to be able to publish their own music, and also for us to kind of find stuff. But you have to put in the time, I feel, to actually like investigate and research and find something, as opposed to, what's just being funneled to you. As well as this can be said as well with Netflix and their algorithms and everything, just kind of feeding you things because they're tracking what you like. But I would rather like to see it kind of change where they'll show you stuff that, that's different. All right, guys. So what was your favorite role thus far?
Favorite role. I mean, probably what I was saying before about The Office or Arrested Development, just because there is something kind of special about acting in something that you are already a fan of yourself. That's very satisfying. Also, I mean, some of the favorite roles I've done have been plays, and not necessarily even because of the product of the final, thing of how the play turned out. A lot of it is just the experience of being with the cast and the friendships that come from it, and all that stuff is incredibly satisfying. So when you're acting and stuff, you hope that the product is good, and that can contribute to whether something is your favorite experience. But so much of your experience is not the final product. Most of the experience of it is, all the time spent making the thing. Whereas when you're a viewer of something, your entire experience is the product. So it's very different. So a lot of my favorite things are just because of the people I met in making the stuff.
I have much less to choose from than Daniel. As far as games go,
but you have like improv. You could say like a lot of your favorite creative things could be improv.
I got to spend 8 years with the same improv team on the main stage at I.O., and that was we were called Redshirt Freshmen, and it was some of the best times. I got to do a play about in like 2013 or so. I haven't done a play since high school, and I did a play at Theater West and here in Los Angeles. that reminded me of the experience of theater and actually working with a cast and building up the show and spending so much time together, and the camaraderie that you built through that, it's kind of irreplaceable. Where voice acting is great, I love it. I'm honored that I get to, when they say yes and I get to do it, but it's a very individual art form. Whereas theater allows you to have that camaraderie and to work off of people and to build those type of relationships. So, aside from voicing Billy Bob, I would say either Improv or that show that I got to do.
It's amazing. All right, guys. So that concludes today's episode, our Avalanche HQ Roundtable. I just want to take a second to say thank you so much to Daniel, David, and Griffin for taking the time out of your, I'm sure, incredibly busy schedules, especially now with, episode intermission and Intergrade is released. I'm sure it's just, super busy for you guys. So I just want to say thank you so much for taking the time out to sit with us to talk about this incredible game, a little bit, about your history with voice acting and as these characters in episode intermission. So thank you so much.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you. And it was a blast to have you on to finally talk with you and learn a bit more about you, your interests, your backstory, and who you are, actually.
Yeah, thanks for having us. It was fun.
Seriously, yes. Thanks for having us. It was an honor, and hope we can talk to you guys again.
Absolutely.
Yeah, let's hope so.
All right, guys. So if you have any ideas for our up and coming episodes, you can write us. Our email is thereunionpodcast@gmail.com, thereunionpodcast@gmail.com. We do have a Discord server, and the link to our Discord server is listed in the description of every episode. So all you have to do is click on that, and you will be automatically added to our Discord server. We do have a Twitter account, so if you haven't followed us yet, go ahead and follow us. It's @reunion_podcast. We do consistent posting, and we actually do some pretty amazing giveaways. So you want to check us out for everything Final Fantasy VII and 7 remake related content. It's @reunion_podcast. We do have a Facebook page. It's Reunion Podcast. Our YouTube channel is The Reunion Podcast. Obviously, don't forget to like, subscribe, write us a review if you feel so inclined. It is the best way to support us here on the podcast. All right, so David, do you have any up-and-coming projects that you would like to plug or, list your socials so our listeners can check you out?
I don't, so I'll tell everyone to listen to Daniel's podcast. My social is D Goldstein VO for both Instagram and Twitter. I wish I had more to plug, but again, go listen to Daniel. He's awesome.
Thanks, man. So because David told you to, please go listen to Stone Cold Classic podcast. It's very funny, and we make movies that would otherwise be a little stuffy, a little bit more accessible. And so I think it'll be a good entree into some really good art work out there for you guys. And then, I'm on social everywhere at Daniel Amerman, and so you can find me there.
Cool. So you can find me on Twitter and Instagram at Griffin Puatu. That's GRIFFIN PUATU. I've got a couple of shows on some streaming services you can watch. You can watch Tokyo Revengers on Crunchyroll, Beastars Season 2 coming out July 15th, and Trese on Netflix, which is an original horror mythology anime you can watch. But thank you guys so much for having me on the podcast.
Thank you so much again, guys, for taking the time out to sit and talk with us today. I know Vyzz and I were super appreciative, and thank you so much again. And have a great rest of your day, and hopefully we'll chat with you again soon.
Thank you again.
Thank you.
Awesome. Thanks so much, guys. This is super fun.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye, guys.